Now, welcome to part 10 of my story that will, in a way, both carry on the Star Wars sequel trilogy or continue the journey of some of its characters, while also sort of rewriting or undoing the story of the sequels at the same time. Or, as I like to put it, this is a story of how what comes next will change what came before. And if you're new to the story, or if you haven't seen the first 9 parts yet, I would highly recommend starting with part 1, or whatever part you left off, and if you like it, working your way back to this one. Otherwise, what is going on right now in the story will make no sense to you whatsoever, and a link to the playlist will be in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the story. We begin on the world of Lothal, where Sabine Wren looks at a mural of the Ghost Crew, a mural of her family that she painted, and after she taps the face of the one that went missing, that being Ezra Bridger, she turns around to see standing a short distance behind her is Ahsoka Tano, and after walking up to her, Sabine simply says, "Ezra and Kanan told us that you had died on Malachor." Ahsoka then draws in a long, deep breath, and as she's letting it out, we see an image briefly flash in her head, an image of Darth Vader with his mask broken, revealing part of the face of Anakin Skywalker beneath. Ahsoka then says, "A part of me did die there, while another part is lost and remains so, and there's only one who can help me find it." Sabine doesn't seem to understand all that completely, but nods nevertheless and says, "Let's go find Ezra then." She then gives a slight, almost awkward or embarrassed grin before saying, "I don't suppose you know a good place to start looking." Ahsoka simply responds, "Tython. Our search will begin on Tython." Next, we're taken across the galaxy, where we first see a Star Destroyer in orbit high above a dreary, gray-looking planet, before we're taken down to it or to the gray skies above it, where we see 3 TIE fighters in pursuit of and firing at a large dragon-like creature soaring through the rainy clouds. When the TIEs hit it and hit it repeatedly, the massive creature lets out a terrible, pain-filled and gut-wrenching screech before falling like a rock to the muddy ground far below, dead before it even impacts it. That's when we're taken to the bridge of the Star Destroyer above, where Grand Admiral Thrawn is standing calmly and looking out at the world below, as an officer calls out, "Another target down, Admiral." Thrawn makes no response and instead turns his head to look at an approaching officer, a commander to be exact, who comes up to him and says, "No sign of or signal from Bridger yet, Admiral, but if this is impacting him the way it is our prisoner, I'm assuming it's only a matter of time before that changes." Thrawn gives her an inquisitive look and then simply says, "Explain." With an arm gesture, the commander directs Thrawn over to a nearby computer terminal. Once there, the commander punches a few buttons, and soon enough, on a monitor, we can see an image of the cell where Rey is chained up, and we can see, by a twisted and tortured expression on her face, that she's in a great deal of physical and or mental pain. She even screams out, begging for them to stop killing them. The commander then explains, this started as soon as the first creature was killed, and is only intensified with each subsequent kill. Thrawn only looks on with a curious, yet pleasantly surprised expression on his face before she finishes. Doubtless Bridger is having the same reaction somewhere down on the planet. Thrawn nods and says, or a worse one considering his more personal connection to these creatures. He thinks for only a moment before saying to her, "Halt the attack for now. Let's give him some time to recover, collect his thoughts, and reconsider his course of action." That's when we're taken down to the surface of the planet, or more accurately, below the surface, where we're in a massive cavern full of light and life, where we see Ezra Bridger laying in a tall patch of grass under a large tree, and he's clearly in a tremendous amount of pain and anguish that is ever so slowly starting to subside. Standing quietly nearby is the masked, light-side figure of Darth Revan, and when Ezra recovers enough to look around and spots Revan, he quickly says, What is going on?" Revan only replies, "Through the Force, you are feeling the death of some of the oldest creatures to dwell anywhere in the galaxy." Ezra shuts his eyes and softly curses under his breath before saying, "Thrawn, he's killing them to lure me out." He thinks a moment and then continues, "Can't they hide down here? Don't they come here anyway to eat?" Revan gives a nod of the head and replies, "They are usually welcome here any time to gorge themselves upon the splendors of this place. But they refuse to come now. They will not risk revealing the existence and location of this place that is sacred to them." Ezra quickly shakes his head and says, "Thrawn will kill them, all of them, to get to me, every last one of them." Revan simply replies, "Then every last one of them will die. As Keeper, you must understand and accept their choice." Ezra again shakes his head. "I never agreed to be Keeper of this place, and I'm certainly not going to stand by and watch them all be slaughtered. Besides, this pain, I can't take the pain." Revan only says, "And yet you will and you must. This is the only way. They accept their fate, and so shall you, Ezra Bridger." But Ezra fires back, "No, I refuse. I refuse all of it. I won't let Thrawn murder them." It almost sounds like Revan sighs ever so softly before making a sweeping gesture with his arm towards the huge cavern all around them and saying, "Unfortunately for you, making your way out of this place without a guide will be quite difficult. A waste of your time, even." Ezra snorts. "A waste of time? You make it sound like there's something else for me to be doing here besides sitting around. I don't even know what you expect me to do as Keeper." To that, though, Revan says nothing and only turns and walks into a tall patch of grass and flowers, and seems to fade away and disappear within it. Ezra then frowns as he looks all around him at what seems to be an endless underground cavern. He then, clearly at random, picks a direction and just starts walking in it. But he only gets a few steps before he catches sight of something in a nearby tree, something he recognizes from somewhere else a long time ago. A smile then creeps across his face as he says, "Well, it's about time." That's where we're taken elsewhere in the galaxy, to the ruins of an ancient Jedi temple on a mountainous and snowy world, where, far under the temple, Mara Jade stands with one hand extended out to Luke Skywalker, who is down on the ground, and with one hand wrapped tightly around a lightsaber that belongs to Luke's sister, Leia. Luke, after glancing briefly at the hand offering to help him up, has his eyes move to and lock on the lightsaber as he says, Where did you get that?" But before Mara can answer, Finn comes to stand beside her, holding out a lightsaber to him, the lightsaber that once belonged to his father, to Anakin Skywalker, and one that he too wielded until he lost it on Cloud City in his duel against that very father. Finn then says, "It comes from the same place this one comes from, and I'm not sure it's going to be easy for you to believe where that is, or maybe I should say, when that is." Luke, his eyes now going to his saber and his father's old lightsaber, almost absently takes the hand of Mara Jade, and she helps pull him to his feet. He then reaches out a hesitant and slightly trembling hand towards his father's saber, and when his hand wraps around and takes hold of it, we can see him overcome with all sorts of feelings, emotions, and memories. And after Finn lets go of it, Luke quickly takes it and turns from them, and takes a few steps away, now clutching the saber tightly to his chest with his eyes shut. Mara and Finn then exchange a look and both give a tiny shrug to each other, saying they don't know what to do or say next. Mara, though, starts to look all around her at the cracks that opened up in the floor of the cavern that swallowed up the water that almost drowned Luke. She then spots the chunks of the stone slab that had been blocking their way and blocking Luke in, until Finn somehow shattered it. She then leans closer to Finn and quietly asks, How did you break through the stone?" Finn gives a big, exaggerated shrug and says, "It was almost like the same feeling I got on Malachor, like someone was working through me, or working through the lightsaber and then working through me." Finn then shakes his head a bit and says, "But as soon as it was over, it was gone, all of it. Like whatever was still part of that saber, or whoever, like it wasn't there anymore. The last bit they had left to give was given to save Luke." A few more moments go by before Luke turns back around and faces them with his eyes misty, as if tears are there that he's refusing to let fall. He then says, "Thank you for bringing this to me. I'm sure there's a good story behind it, and one that shouldn't be saved for another time." Finn then takes a step towards Luke, saying, I don't know if you're going to believe me, but it's from the future. I'm from the future, a future we need to prevent." Luke then says, averting his eyes a bit, a future where my nephew falls to the dark side and brings about great suffering. Is that it? Finn thinks on that for a few seconds before giving something almost like a shrug and saying, well, yes and no. He does fall to the dark side, but it's Palpatine. It's all Palpatine. Luke then quickly asks back, is it really all Palpatine? Or was a part of it my fault? Finn then says, I don't know the whole story, but Palpatine was in his head since he was very young. He never had a chance against that. Luke gives Finn a dubious look before saying, he should have had more than a chance against it with me there. I should have sensed it. I should have stopped it. And this time around, I'll make sure I do. That's when Poe finally comes forward, followed closely by R2, and says, yeah, that might be part of the problem, actually. You trying to stop it, I mean. Which is why I never sought you out to tell you what happens to Ben. Luke gives Poe an inquisitive look, as if there's this faintest recognition there. Who are you? Luke asks. Well, I'm a Poe Dameron. You know my parents, Shara and Kes Dameron. You fought in the war with them, even. Luke shakes his head but says, I do know them, but I also know their son, Poe. They showed him to me right after he was born, which was only a few years ago. Poe then says, well, yeah, I'm actually from the future too, but I've been back a lot longer than Finn here has. Been around since the end of the Clone Wars, actually. Luke then turns his attention to Mara and again glances at the lightsaber in her hand before saying, and let me guess, you're from the future too, and that Leia gave you that because you're someone I'm supposed to know and recognize, someone that's going to help me in the future? Mara glances at the saber and quickly shakes her head and says, No, I have nothing to do with your future, trust me. It's just dumb luck that I have this and I ended up here with him. She finishes by jerking her head in the direction of Finn to indicate him, but Luke says back, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck. Besides, there's something familiar about you somehow, as if we've met before. Mara quickly responds, believe me, we haven't. You'd remember it more clearly because it wouldn't have been this pleasant, shall we say. Luke seems a little taken aback by that, but before he can say anything, all of them stop and freeze in place when they hear what can only be described as a large cracking sound that seems to come from directly below them, from the floor of the cavern that already has several large cracks in it that allowed the water to drain out. A moment later, another and then another large cracking sound is heard, an instant before the floor beneath breaks into large chunks and gives way and starts falling. But immediately, Luke and Mara reach out with the Force, and together, they manage to take hold of the large chunk directly underneath all of them. And though they can't stop it from falling, they greatly reduce the rate at which it falls and essentially lower themselves into a much, much larger circular or dome-shaped cavern below, one that has walls that glitter and sparkle with thousands, if not tens of thousands, of pinpoints of light. Once they sit down, they all glance around and marvel, and it's Luke that says as he walks towards the walls and looks at what sparkles upon them, Kyber crystals. Finn shakes his head and says, what now? Luke repeats, Kyber crystals. They're what powers a lightsaber. That's when Mara, who immediately turned her attention to the center of the room instead of the walls, quickly follows that up by saying, and it looks like they power something else too. Luke then turns and looks towards the center of the room where, thanks to the numerous shimmering crystals in the walls, there's more than enough light to see quite well, and he looks upon what seems to be a large, flat, circular stone placed in the very center of the room, and one surrounded by runes of some kind carved into the hard stone floor. As Luke and Mara walk towards it, he says, what is this now? Mara gives a shrug and fires back, you're the Jedi and this is a Jedi temple. Shouldn't you be telling us what it is? Luke gives her a look as if asking why she's being hostile towards him, and he then says, I can tell that the Force is quite strong with you, and that you've been trained to use it. I'm wondering by whom exactly? Mara then gives him a devilish little grin before saying, well, there weren't a whole lot of options out there for training, as you know. So if you think about it, if you stretch out with your feelings or whatever it is you Jedi always say to do, I'm sure you'll figure it all out. Luke seems to be thinking on that until he reaches the center of the room and the round stone that's there. That's when he says, it looks like a place to meditate, perhaps. Mara just gives him a look as if to say, well, how did you ever figure that one out? Luke ignores the look as he reaches out to touch the rock or platform, placing his hand on it with the palm down and flat against the stone surface. After shutting his eyes and concentrating for a few long moments, the glow of all the kyber crystals in the walls in the room seems to intensify, and the runes etched on the floor begin to glow with a soft bluish white light. And at the same time, what can only be described as a sort of visible energy seems to emanate up and out of the platform. As this is happening, Mara takes a few steps back as Poe and Finn look on in awe. R2-D2 even lets out a long, drawn-out whistle of amazement. When Luke removes his hand after a long couple seconds, it all ends and he says nothing and only has an expression on his face that kind of says, "Whoa, what was that?" Mara then, a look on her own face as if she's annoyed she has to explain it to him, then says, "It's a Jedi Seeing Stone, though I've never heard of one being powered by kyber crystals before." Luke, at least pretending not to be bothered by her annoyed and impatient look, then says, "What were they used for?" At first, Mara shrugs as if she doesn't know, but then she sees the ever so interested look on Luke's face and can't seem to stop herself from saying, "From what I understand, the first Jedi made them in an effort to hear the call of others across the galaxy, others that were strong with the Force, a type of ancient communication system used long before hyperspace travel was commonplace." Mara again shrugs as if she could care less before continuing. "There's not many left from what I understand. The practice became less necessary as time went on and the Jedi developed other means to find those who were Force sensitive. Then, when the Empire took over, Palpatine had all known Seeing Stones, save one, destroyed to prevent possible surviving Jedi in hiding from putting the call out to each other in secret or finding potential new Jedi to eventually replenish their ranks." Mara then lets out a sigh as she turns away from the stone and finishes, "The only one he didn't destroy was on Tython. That one he left alone and kept under constant surveillance, should a Jedi seek it out in order to use it to find and communicate with others. And some did indeed come, and they were dealt with." Luke then says, turning to look at her, "And how do you know that?" Mara snaps back, "Do I really have to explain it to you?" She then shakes her head and looks at Finn, as if to tell him, "I can't do this." But Finn only gives her a look and a quick nod of the head as if to say, "Yes, you can." That's when Luke, seemingly not upset at all at Mara or the assumptions he could make about her past, he says to her, "You said you'd never seen one powered by kyber crystals before. What could be the purpose behind that?" Mara looks like she just wants to snap back at him, but again she locks eyes with Finn, takes a quick calming breath, and says, "I honestly do not know. None of the other ones destroyed by Palpatine were anything like this one, not even the one on Tython, which seemed to be the most important or centralized of the sort of network they formed." She then looks at Luke, notices he seems to be appreciating every word she says, and so she continues, "Palpatine had no idea this one was here, or he would have destroyed it too. And I'm a little curious how you knew it was here, considering it apparently spends hundreds of years at a time buried under the snow." Luke gives her a sheepish little grin and says, "Would you believe the location came to me in a vision?" Mara rolls her eyes and says, "Of course it did. Must be nice to have everything come so easy to you." Luke looks like he wants to argue that, but bites his tongue and instead says, "What doesn't make sense is why the Jedi would build this temple and the Seeing Stone in a place that's buried under the ice and snow most of the time, that's hidden hundreds of years at a time and only exposed for some 30 to 40 days when the planet is in the right part of its orbit." At that, R2 makes some beeps and whistles, and Luke says, "That's right, R2, thanks. I almost forgot. The orbit apparently changed and was elongated several thousand years ago somehow." Mara shakes her head a bit, and she shuts her eyes as if she just wants this all to go away, to not be dealing with Luke Skywalker of all beings in the galaxy. When she again opens them, she finds herself staring face to face with Finn. She then says, 30 to 40 days before it's all buried again, huh? Well, then I guess we don't have much time to figure it all out." She then turns and looks at Luke right into his eyes, and Luke, for the first time really, stares back into her green eyes and seems to get lost for a moment. He then, a bit awkwardly, looks away and says, "Yeah, let's see what else we can find down here." We're then taken across the galaxy to the planet Tython, where Ahsoka Tano and Sabine Wren stand atop a mountain where an egg-shaped stone rests in a large circular indentation in the ground and is surrounded by rock formations on all sides that curve up as if to guard or protect it. We then hear Sabine ask, "What did you call this thing again?" Ahsoka responds, "It's a seeing stone." Sabine then says back, "And this is going to show you where Ezra is?" Ahsoka climbs up on the stone and says, "With any luck, it will either let me see or hear him, or him me, wherever he is in the galaxy." Sabine looks rather skeptical, especially when a few long seconds go by where nothing happens. But soon enough, Ahsoka begins to float a few inches above the rock, and a strange energy field seems to form around her. At the same time, far across the galaxy, Ezra Bridger is walking through a lush jungle-like environment, his eyes on a very colorful convor, or bird-like creature, as it flies from one tree to the next, apparently leading him through the jungle. Or so Ezra hopes as he says to it, "You are actually trying to lead me out of here, right? Not deeper in. And I'm hoping and assuming you showing up means Ahsoka is finally coming, like she promised." The convor lets out a series of excited bird sounds before flying to the next tree, and Ezra, after making a hopeful shrug, simply follows. Next, we're taken into space above the planet, where Thrawn stands on the bridge of his Star Destroyer and says to the commander at his side, "It's been some time. Perhaps Bridger needs a bit more encouragement." The commander then calls out, "Inform squadron leaders to resume the attack." We're then taken back down to the planet, into the cavern underneath where Ezra has just come to a dark cave or tunnel in the side of a steep hill that the convor is circling above as it chirps excitedly. As Ezra makes his way towards it, saying something about how he hopes he hasn't been led astray, he suddenly drops to his knees and screams out in immense pain. That's when we're taken back to Tython and see Ahsoka using the Seeing Stone, and she too suddenly screams out in pain as the energy field around her fades away, and she falls back down to the rock and basically rolls off of it into the ground. Sabine is immediately at her side and asking what's wrong when Ahsoka says, "It's Ezra. He's in pain. Terrible pain." Sabine then says, "Do you know where he is? Where to find him?" Ahsoka nods and says, I think so, but I don't know that we'll be able to get there in time to save him." And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this part of the story, and what you think might happen next. So leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.